again with Natalie Meddings, author of How to Have a Baby and My Home Birth Matters. Hi, Natalie.
Hello.
And we were recently together at an antenatal appointment and with one of our lovely mums, and we were talking a lot to her, being a second-time mum, about some of the kind of things that we see happen with second-time mums. So we thought this was quite an important conversation to have, because just like we've spoken before about patterns in birth, there's also, we think, we see patterns in second-time mums, just like you can see patterns with first-time mums. And first-time mums get quite a lot of information and attention, and it's quite nice to do something for second-time mums. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, and our experiences and how we kind of came across thinking that there were some differences here. So Natalie, do you want to kick us off with how you started noticing?
Yeah, although I might flip it back because I was going to ask you. So I wanted, just to add to what you said, that maybe we can sort of show people what we're thinking by literally traveling through our own journey. So as a rookie doula, I suppose I was still years ago approaching, I didn't know any different. I just sort of thought of labour as, I suppose if a second birth did go quickly, it still is often accredited to luck, or people go, oh, that was quick, or if it's just really efficient in various ways, or anyway, all the differences that happen. It just seems to be a bit treated as random. And I think you'll probably agree with me that when you've been a doula, you for some time, well, it's probably about the third year that you really start to kind of, second or third year, you just you of course there's the idea of quickness, but it's not just that. It's to do with how it builds and how it unfolds. And I mean, I'll tell you my one, and then maybe if you can think of somebody that you learnt through. I learned in a you talk about learn your lesson. I had been with this mother for a first time, and it had been quite a tricky birth with a back-to-back labour, which is probably the very typical issue for some second-time mums, because they sort of go, oh, birth's hard and it's long, and so you sort of enter the second one with this very natural anticipation that it's going to repeat to a point like that, or at the very least, right? And so I went round there when things began, and I was very inexperienced, and she was lying in bed, and her husband had gone in a different space, and I laid with her, and contractions were really not a bother, so they were just completely, she was like that, just sort of rising and falling in that sort of way, where her tummy and she would sigh, but it was very relaxed, like a float through, middle of the night. And I was drifting off, and we had the lights off, and it was probably late evening, actually, late 11 o'clock or something. And so what would I ever say? I would have been naively and ignorantly thinking, oh, well, she hasn't got that vigour that a first-time mum has, where she can't be anywhere near having a baby, because she's like, oh, can I? And she'd lean over and get her glass of water, and she would sort of gently sigh breathe. Whereas what I suppose I was imagining, if she was close to having a baby, it would be, and it would be very sort of quite sweaty and quite rock and roll, and the whole physical, visceral urge that we see in first-time mums, that is some hours before you. I mean, I was quite inexperienced, and so I was just lying with her, and then she went, oh, like that, and I sort of went like that, and she went, there's something there. And that. And I just didn't, I don't know what I thought. Anyway, she's still fully clothed. She had pyjama bottoms and knickers, I think. She'd had a pad. And I said, oh, I want to go to the toilet. And then she got to the toilet, and there was a baby there. It was like her head was coming. And it was really awful, because, of course, I mean, she was fine. But the baby came. Okay, so you learn your lesson, because you know, it's all very well when the baby arrives and everybody's relaxed about it, but she was relaxed about it, but there was, I talked to a midwife about it afterwards. Nobody was angry. I mean, what's nature, it happens, right? But I do think it is true what the midwife said, is that I, of course, was looking after her, and I suppose my inexperience, I mean, would it have mattered either way? She wasn't frightened. It's the second time. She's super, super healthy. Baby's super healthy. So please don't think I'm saying by this, oh, we got it wrong, the birth went wrong. I don't mean that. Babies arrive sometimes very quickly, the way it is. I'm just meaning, for the purposes of us understanding that journey, how can somebody go from being nearly as normal as we are now to pushing without you hardly noticing? So that was my lesson, because I remember this midwife saying, she didn't say, oh, second births are quick. She didn't say that. She was just trying to indicate many things. And I learned a lot of that midwife, about confidence and the efficiency of the body second time, and that you can't read it, and, you need to learn. And I suppose thereafter it became, definitely something I'd consider. And, I would be very, very, reluctant to support a woman too far away from where I live second time, things like that. You have to think about timing, and that isn't because, and I want to emphasize, that second birth is always quick. It's not about quick. It's how it builds in a quite unobtrusive way. And then what I call, or I think I've told you this before, we'll go through it, there comes what we call the doozy. It's the boofy one. And from that moment, you've pretty much, depending on the situation and the environment, I think if she'd been in hospital long enough, from that the first bigger feeling, she probably could have still been a couple of hours. I think that the reason she gave way to it is she was very confident, and she was in her own bedroom, and she was totally safe. And I suppose she did have a doula. And, we do create safety, and maybe that was a part of her that just released. But it's very much this, if you could do it with your hands, it's like, unlike a second time mum, it's sort of like this, and then you go up a notch, and it's like this, and it's like that. But it's just much more kind of very low, and then it goes like that right to there. It could be a day, couldn't it? And then it just goes like that, sort of effectively. And then once you're in labour, my take on that, once you go into labour, there is decision and concision, is what I would say. It's like, it's a set piece, So maybe do you remember who you learned?
I was thinking about just like flashes of my second time mums through my head, but actually the first one I ever did as a doula was my own. Because I trained as a doula, between my first and my second. So when I had my second, I was obviously a doula, and I was so lucky to have the birth I had second time after a difficult first one. But because we're talking about the mechanics and how it moves it differently, I think it's quite interesting to talk about, because obviously I was in it. I really felt it within me. And it was so different to what I expected, in that I was so normal for so much of it. I remember talking to you about this afterwards, and half an hour before she came, I went up to the deli to get a sandwich. We went for a walk. I was having contractions. I've been having them for hours, but I was not afraid, remotely afraid. I was planned home birth. I was fine. I had my doula. Anyway, we'll get to that. But, and we went to the deli. I was like, I'm hungry. So we went for a walk in the sunshine, went to the deli. And you say about the doozy, I had a Whopper outside the shoe shop because I didn't want to go into the deli. And I was like, wow, I was like, that was a big one. But ambled back, didn't worry too much about it, got on my ball, had my tuna melt, and I was like, this is all fine, but really clear. I was really clear, because I think I was so undisturbed. Like, my son had gone off in the morning to my mum's. It was just me. My husband was next door, because I was fine. He was like watching telly. I was like, I'm okay. And I was very clear, and I was just having them, but they were fine. And then I'd had that doozy, and then we got back. I had my sandwich. I did put on my hypnobirthing track, actually. It was for the first time. And I dozed off for 5 minutes, I reckon. like a few minutes, and then I just woke up with an almighty rush. Like I can't, it in my head, it's like the Matrix. I like flew off the bed, but I couldn't have, right? But it felt like this gigantic force just went whoosh through my body, and I just stood up because I couldn't do anything else, and I was like, what was that? And I must have roared, but I don't remember because it was so from somewhere else. Went to the toilet, sat down. I don't think I did a wee. And then I just roared again, and my husband came to the door and he was like, are you okay? I was like, and they're still talking like this. I was like, yeah, I'm fine, I think. That was weird. Did I make that noise? Because it was so from somewhere else. And then I felt her head coming. I was just like, oh. And I just instinctively, because obviously we were alone, we hadn't alerted anyone because I was fine. And then it's so funny what you do, it's so different in a completely undisturbed birth, because I just rushed to my bedroom and got on all fours instinctively, and then that's how she was born. And people that
something. Yeah, go on, sorry.
No, it's fine. But I just think people are so worried often, aren't they, when they hear about, oh, it could be quick, it could be this, you could be on your own. That people really fear that. And I can't tell you how safe it felt.
Yeah.
And it's that it was so fine and so safe and so certain. Like I knew my baby was coming. There was nothing more certain than my baby was coming. And I don't know, it was just really
lovely.
It was really a good feeling, but it did, like you say, it just kind of did this, and then it went just out of nowhere, and it felt like it was out of nowhere. It just suddenly released.
Can you see, in relation to what you just said in the woman I was with, can you see it's tempting for us, particularly the standard maternity care model, which is what I was being questioned about, is how didn't you know, or why didn't you come in earlier? But the thing is the problem is with second time is it's not a question of, oh, we let it go and then suddenly it happened. It's because you literally aren't in labour. I mean, you're not in labour, and what it is that, so if you were to go in early, you wouldn't be in labour, and then very likely it would self-fulfill as many, many hours, because the body still is going to go, well, where the hell am I? You know, because I'm still in a conscious mindset, in an unfamiliar place with strange faces. You wouldn't relax into it. So it's not a question that that I've missed the moment and I've been able to ignore it when I was with that woman, or that you missed your moment and that somehow did you not know it was building. We can talk about the biology in a second, but it's precisely how second births unfold that is, you could say it's the bonus ball, or it's, you know, probably viewed by some maternity caregivers, maybe see it as the problem, especially when doulas are involved, because in a way the mother is she misjudging it? I don't think it's misjudgment. That's what I'm trying to say. It's not misjudgment because you've been hanging in there. It's just because the body becomes incredibly efficient at the release. Basically second birth is a release button, effectively.
Yes, and I was just thinking that in my head, because I've seen it with my mums as well. It's so much clearer in a second time mum. It's like a switch. It's like you say, a release button has been pressed. And I was just thinking about a couple of my other births, a few of the second time mums. And often as a doula, you get there and you're thinking, oh, okay, that's quite early on, you know, sometimes. And then within a few minutes with a second time mum, often they maybe have waited for you, you know, to let go or something. And it's so obvious. It just clicks and they've gone, they're off, and
and I can remember shutting my front door on my first child and my mum, and from the moment I remember pushing the door, an agreement in my body happened. Like this. And this is the thing. So where do we go with this? Because I think it's okay. The reason I'm a massive fan of, it's like I love doing the doula detective work on it because it's so interesting. The biology is fascinating. You get to understand birth really beautifully through second birth in a way. And in a way, I always tell first-time mums, give birth like a second-time mum. I mean, you want to get in that mindset, because it is possible. It is possible, because let's look at what's happening to a second-time mum. So what's happening is the standard, I want to forgive the word clinical or medical take on it, is, oh, well, tried and tested pelvis. The most boring nuts and bolts reduction ever, right? Because it's like, yeah, okay, you could argue that pelvis is a horrible phrase. It's called a tested pelvis. It's basically trial of labour. We now know that baby can come through that, and it does it easier the second than the first, sort of logic, right? How do you then explain? I have had the most unbelievably similar to what we've just discussed birth with people who've never laboured and had first cesareans. I've had the same experience with women who've had incredibly complicated and are now traumatised from a first birth, have the same. So how are they didn't have an easy birth, so that didn't pass through their pelvis easily. So how do you explain that? It doesn't. It's the most. And of course the sad story to that is that then so many second-time mums in this country, particularly where the cesarean rate is so high, where the induction rate is so high, where complications are so, interventions are very, very high in number, is that they then go through their pregnancy, I think, with a lot of apprehension and stage fright, and oh, here we go again. And it's such a shame, because if you could sort of spread the confidence, we could do, there's so much to be excited about. So I think it's worth us investigating why should every second time mum should be very confident, even if she's had a complicated first experience, or even she's never laboured, right? And she should be very confident because of a few things that are really about evolutionary biology. It isn't just her pelvis has done it, because as we said, it might not have done. It's because in my experience, why does a second time mother have this rapid onset, decisive, propulsive, let's get on with it? If you think of, woman, like what you talked about this before, didn't we? Like 0.0 woman in her cave 1,000 years, she's now got, if you think of what allows us to give birth with safety and give birth easily, is about safety, deep primal safety, which you don't feel when you know that there's a predator around, right? And that is still deeply within us. When we're giving birth, we have to feel safe in a way you can't describe. It's like, it's emotional primal safety. It's not, that comes way above medical safety. If the mother doesn't feel entirely held and able to switch this off, and that she is literally, she has nothing to hold on to, nothing to be in charge of, right? She will release her baby. Well, then if you look at a second time mum, she's got a toddler probably. And so what does nature insist on? That there's a birth is quick, because she wants to get back to her 2-year-old, really, or she wants to make sure the 2-year-old's safe. And if she was labouring for 15 hours, biologically, it's so unlikely that nature would let her be away from her 2-year-old. I mean, if we were out in the wild, and we were all living in on the savannah plain or something, you know what I mean? And you had to let your 2-year-old wander around while you had 15-hour labour, it'd be eaten by a lion, wouldn't it? You know what I mean? So it's working from that basis, that the body wants to be efficient, which is why the beauty of second birth is so amazing physiologically, because there's so much first-time mums can learn from it, this is what we mean by the program is running. The deep blueprint, the template, is phenomenally effective, efficient, and competent if you provide for it. And so I remember, so you can look at this two ways. I can remember a woman who kept on and offing second time. Every night she'd have cramps. I wasn't her doula, but I heard about this after. And it was really getting agitating. I think she had a whole week of it, right? And in the end, her very good doula, probably, I don't think I'd have done this actually, but it was really, she went, instead of going, don't worry, she said, what's wrong? She just knew that there's something, and then she just went, well, the thing is, I've got childcare between 9 and 11, and I've got childcare between 2 and 10. And she started talking about her childcare schedule, for when this baby was going to be, how she'd get to hospital. And the doula said, put the phone down, sort it out. Somebody has to sort this out for you.
Yeah.
And is your mother near? Have you got a neighbour? You need to, you can make this better. If you have to have childcare, you're going to have a complete childcare, or have a baby at home,
Yeah.
And she sorted it out. She said quite literally, as she put the phone down and arranging for her mum to come up, bang, she said she started feeling it already, because that's how efficient and effective it is. Like, right, green light, do it, which is it's a readiness, it's birth readiness, you know what I mean? And then to go to the biology of it, I mean, this is more standardly known, I'm sure lots of people know this, but effectively, why is it physiologically? So that's the emotions. Why does a mother release? And why does she need to, why does birth have to happen in that way second time? It's just safer.
Yeah.
But also, then you do go a bit back to the tried and tested, is that muscle memory is in the mix. So the womb is, the uterine fibres, muscle fibres, are just obviously more responsive, because they are used to that ripple, if you like, and a bit like, if you think about what is room one, what is the build up, the early labour. In a first time mum, it's the muscle fibres are trying to become coordinated. They're trying to get in to work in concert. So in that, I know I always do this with you, I don't know why, but like the ripple of a blanket, it has to get that thing going, so that it's on the money, da-da-dum, 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 like that, it creates that rhythm, right? And second time, this is why you were like as normal as the day down the deli, and my woman, we were listening to, I remember we were listening to something outside, like a party, and she was as like you, she was as normal as anything. It wasn't me misreading it, is that she wasn't in labour. And what happened is, when she made that, what was that? Probably it was about 5 minutes. I mean, on my second birth, it said my second birth on my notes, it said that my labour was 30 minutes. And a lot of women, if they look at their notes, they'll see that, because what do they mean by that? They mean the moment the uterus becomes coordinated to emergence is usually 1 or 2 hours tops, really. And it's that moment. So the muscle fibers literally start working in concert. And they do, and they are, not only are they then all on it and going for it, the cervix is already, in the second time mum, a little bit open. So she's already got a bit of a head start. That isn't even just it. It's that she's got well, there is a bit of the pelvis thing, there's a bit of the cervix thing. She's now got the efficiency, and she's got that, the thing you just said, she's got no fear. So once a mother knows, do you know what I really think it is that second time mums don't realise there's no choice. They just got to get on with it, and they do it with decision. They do it, and so when they have this clarity, they go, right, I'm going to do it now, right? And they go for it, right? So whereas first time mums spend all this time and attention on hypnobirthing, and I'm not saying hypnobirthing isn't a useful tool second time, it helps relax, as it clearly did you. In a sense, a second, third, fourth time mum can do that mind wipe. Everything's aligning in one. And I'm sorry, I'm not the best antenatal teacher with my stuff. I just use.
I love your props.
No, but a lot of people have got a really lovely knitted wombs, but mine is literally just a cardigan. But so that's the baby with its back. I mean, it's not. This isn't all cuddled. This isn't with the legs and feet all under it, which it would be. But just to see from the head like that.
Yeah.
What's effective, and also I always think that knitting always looks a bit like muscle fibers. It's that, like, everything's just drawing up like that. And second time mums really just demonstrate beautifully what is happening, which is it's the dynamic forces of downwardness of contractions, gravity's pulling the baby, the head is heavy, and it just becomes a decisive, as we said, concise sequence, an engineering sequence. I want to make it more efficient, but I know I'm not going to manage it. It was just really to show you, effectively that's happening, isn't it?
Yeah.
So dilation, you get to that point, and very, very in one swift, decisive move, second time, as that happens, the baby just slides through like a sleeve, and you get that and you very quickly, that's now the baby in the birth canal.
Mm-hmm.
Now that, to get to that point, if I was to take that back to closed, you know, a first time mum would be, you know, a thick, hard, long cervix, right? That takes a long time first time, and rightly and gladly so, to soften, thin, stretch. Second time, it's already looser, givier probably. The mother's more relaxed, the contractions are more effective, like we said. So very quickly, once she goes into motion, once that gear shift happens, that happens in the way we said, with this doozy, this we probably need to explain what we meant by doozy. And then you get, which is why pushing is not a big deal really second time either, because it the other distinction is that, you know, as you know, I feel about the word pushing, it doesn't even mean anything. What is actually happening is an elimination, is a sense of, you know, fetal ejection reflex, whatever you want to call it. You know, you're just joining in with what is a heave ho, you know, that, right? Second time, the mother feels that quite, I mean, by the way, we're talking in general. You're going to have the odd exception, which we can maybe discuss, like we said earlier, about the odd birth that doesn't go quite predictably. But in general, second time mums are much more readable in this way, much more than first time. And it tends to unfold once she has gone into room 2, once she has in that labouring state. It is like a set piece. It's like literally a register, or you could say moving through the gears. She moves through the gears in very highly predictable way, which you've seen countless times, I've seen countless times. And interestingly, and I wonder if we should say this, I think you feel the same, I feel it's often missed in hospital by standard routine care. And you'll often get second time mums go to triage and they get a vaginal exam and they get told they're 1 or 2 centimetres. Well, to my mind, that's really quite dangerous to have a number put on it for a second time mum. It couldn't be more, A, meaningless, 2, irrelevant, because it might be true that she might have a whole evening to go, a whole day to go or something, and that she's just beginning. But equally, it goes back to what is there such a thing as a dilation, as a reliable dilation measurement? Not really, because what are you measuring? You're measuring something that isn't a fixed point. It's a dynamic process. Gravity, movement, baby heaviness, contraction power, mother's emotions. We've said this in the other films. So the baby's opening the mother at a rate that is only the mother knows and the baby knows, right? Well, that is especially so for second time, because a 2 centimetre mum will have a baby maybe 10 minutes later, potentially. She could do, because if she only has to do that, which is why we go back to, oh, well, hang on, are you telling us that second births are really quick? Because if they're really quick, I just need to get to hospital immediately. No, it doesn't really work like that. This is why it's tricky, because it's like, if you could just not be in labour, and if you then go in an uncomfortable, slightly unfamiliar space, your body will not agree to it. It could easily cash out, but the mother just doesn't relax and give in to it. So it's tricky. You don't want to get in there preemptively and say, oh, that's okay, I'll just cover myself, I'll get to where I need to go. You still have to really wait for that point where her body steps up a gear. And then you have to pretty much accept that very, 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 very likely, it's not always, but very, very likely, from that point of going into labour, she will, in my experience, feel something new nearly every contraction, if not maybe every other contraction. But pretty much what we as doulas would hear in a home birth particularly, you'll hear, oh, you know, da-da, ah, sort of, and then literally 3 minutes later, ah, and then 3 minutes later, ah, is that what you used to hear? That's what I hear. Oh, yeah. And I don't think people hear that in hospital. You don't, or certainly in unsupported, when women are left, or they don't feel. I think it can cash out as longer than it needs to be, you know, in the sense, in an unsupported, in a physiologically unsupported setting, it can make it a bit drawn out. I mean, I suppose does it matter?
And I think,
but you know, like, I think birth should be.
yeah, and I just think on that point about it is tricky, because you could, like you're saying, you could go in and not be very far along in theory, but then could be soon. So you don't want to go in early, but you don't want to go in too late. But there is this kind of fear around the baby just suddenly coming, isn't there? I think there's a lot of fear in that. And I know you have as well, we've been accidentally at births, you know, where babies just come and we might be the only ones there with them. And I've experienced having a baby on my own. It's not scary. And I always say this to mums and dads I support. I sort of say, well, if the baby's coming, baby's fine. Because usually, you know, everything's working beautifully, the baby's just coming. And I do wonder why that is more scary sometimes than going in and being observed and having people prod and poke you and having maybe internal examinations and things that you need to do in hospital and follow protocols and procedures. And I wonder why, you know, why is just having your baby kind of swiftly at home or in the car sometimes is more scary than, I'm not saying a hospital is scary.
I think it's probably useful to say something we said in the last film, where, because people might think, oh, we're being a bit insurgent there and sort of going, you know, who cares about, of course not, you know, we're the biggest upholders of safe maternity care, and you know, but I suppose what you're saying, and you'd be right, is let's lay this out. For a second time mum whose pregnancy has been deemed healthy, and let's just understand what we mean by this, a well-grown baby. This is a really key point. Now, we're not talking about complicated pregnancies. That's a separate story, and let's just set that aside. We're not talking about, you know, high-risk issues. In a healthy pregnancy, what we've got to understand what we mean. We mean the baby's well-grown. What does that mean? The well-grown phrase means equipped for labour, right? Then you look at the mother. She will also have had very regular appointments to confirm that she is also healthy. So it's not a winging it situation. I mean, it's not ideal, and it is, you know, obviously women, you know, naturally would need and want, or maybe, you know, want midwife care, but you've got to kind of get out of your head that the birth can't happen or won't happen unless there's an expert present. I mean, you know, it is obviously the better, safer way in the round, but it's not to make the opposite assumption, which is that it's super dangerous if there isn't. You know, proportionate risk is what we're talking here. Ideally, it's better to have an experienced caregiver with you, but it's exactly as you say. So to go back to that, let's break down the risks. It's interesting how many people with a fast birth, when the parent, you know, labour that's moving ahead fast, will happily get into a car, which, if you think from a mammalian perspective, it's instinctively, it's quite counterintuitive and counterinstinctive to go out into the world when you can literally feel the baby coming. I'm not sure there can be any mammal in the world that would take themselves out into an open, vulnerable space. They'd do the opposite, they'd hide. But actually, because we're still culturally, I was planning to have a baby in hospital, I've got to get in the car. And that, just to say to everybody, you know, if your baby was coming in that way that, you know, we're saying, where it was quite clearly you can feel the pressure growing, it would be more, there'd be more risk attached to getting in the car and having a baby in a car traveling without a partner to even be able to stop the car, than just sitting safely and calling an ambulance and being in your own safe, warm, private space, you know. So that is, I think we get risk all muddled up in our society, because for a healthy woman who's giving birth quickly, that's far less risk than being out in the cold, in the dark, in a car on the road. And that's much more risky.
Yeah, and if we're looking at safety, like that kind of bigger force of feeling safe, then for your body to be doing it, you can trust it, because you must feel within you somewhere deeply safe, because your body's releasing.
Absolutely.
So,
I mean, do you think maybe it's worthwhile saying that? It leads us neatly on to choices around birth for second-time mothers. But so now it's interesting to me that we've still got a 2.5%, probably bigger thanks to the coronavirus, that this home birth rate has gone up, but essentially it was 2.5%, which is interesting because that means an awful lot of women having second babies in this country, but clearly they don't change their mind about the setting. Now that's really interesting on several counts. Firstly, because it's actually, science has proven, evidence proves, it is safer to have a baby second time at home. Safer. Can we say that again? Can you say the word as well? You say it.
It's safer.
Safer.
Not just safe, but safer.
How is that piece of information not in our culture? I find it, I don't even know. It came out in 2011 as a result of the birthplace study. It was reconfirmed in 2017 by Hutton et al. In case anyone wants to see that even now, not only second time, but first time mothers, it is as safe for mother or baby to have a baby at home or in hospital or in a birth centre. It is the differences are so insignificant that it's sort of moot point wherever you have the baby. That's the main point. But what we're discussing here for second time is no, safer. So what do we mean by that? For the reasons, first of all, what we just said, because I suppose if you were to really start breaking it down, you've so got a vastly more chance. It's so simple second time to introduce variables that are unnecessary in what is going to be a swift and efficient process anyway. You're introducing greater chance of bleeding, you're introducing a greater chance of tearing, interventions generally. And of course, let's now picture the mother whose second time has gone in, who's experiencing really thwacking great contractions, and then she gets told she's 1 or 2 centimetres, which she often will be, right? Because the body's always on delay from what she's feeling. And let's picture a fearful second mum who maybe had a difficult first birth. Oh, you're 1 or 2 centimetres, your age is off. Oh, forget that. Give me the epidural again, right? So you get the epidural again. Now it does cash out as long and complicated because of the, not massively long, but the interventions begin the roller coaster. And I would be very interested myself to find, it must be vastly reduced, the assisted delivery rate for second time, but it's still massive. You still have a lot of women having instrumental deliveries for a second time. Why? Because of epidural. And that's not to demonize epidural. It's an amazing thing. We've said that before. But is it always, is it as necessary as it might be? Is it as necessary and as warranted as used if a mother was told, some will be met with amazing midwives who say, oh my God, you're just there. Don't you worry. Fantastic. Yeah. But equally, I reckon that a lot of inexperience might tell that second mother, you're 1 centimetre, you've got ages, go home. But what's she feeling? Unbelievable intensity. Tell the story maybe of your 8th mum. I know that's 8th, not 2nd. No, 7th.
7th.
Yeah. That's the case, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So 7th time mum, we were in hospital at the time, and she had I think it was her first check actually, and she was 1 centimetre. But after the check, a bit like that switch we've been talking about, she was very, very normal every day before that check. After the check, sat on the edge of the bed. They just told her she was 1, and they probably did use some language like just or only, which is unnecessary anyway, isn't it? Why don't we go, yes, you're 1, amazing, like why can't we celebrate 1? And then she just closed her eyes and said, the baby's coming soon. And she knew, and she absolutely knew with complete certainty that baby was coming. And you don't question a 7th time mum, although they did. And her baby did come quite soon after, but we had some difficulty because they wanted to move her from the room because they were like, you're only 1. And we tried to fight it, and in the end she just was like, it's fine, I'll go, but the baby's coming. She's saying that. And we went up to antenatal and she started to push. So
what if she hadn't been that confident? What if she's a second time mum who possibly had a traumatic first birth, and now she's not going to believe that, and she's going to agree with it and think, oh no, are you kidding? It's so all over again, it's repeating
Yeah.
itself. I mean, as doulas, I think we should probably say something that's really obvious about this discussion that we haven't mentioned, which is a doula work is very commonly we are employed by people second time, by people who've had very difficult first births. So when you're teaching them, birth preparing them, you're having sessions and meetings, one of the biggest problems is to try and convince them that it's going to be easier, because they tend to think it's all about, I've got to do it differently, I've got to be braver, I've got to make different choices, and sort of an experienced doula, we've almost got to do nothing. I mean, you just say, don't worry, it's just going to be simple. It's that simple. You could almost reduce the whole preparation to, look, just boil it down to the basics, because you can pretty much guarantee that even if she's had the complicated first experience, the safety the doula provides, the doing it slightly different that she will now install, i.e. she'll probably know a few things about warmth, darkness and privacy, etc. Just with a few changes like that, you're talking, I mean, I can't remember the last second birth I've been at that was longer than 2 hours, 2-3 hours. It occasionally, as you said earlier, you get the occasional one that is a bit longer, which is why one mustn't say second birth is always quick and always easy. It isn't. By the way, it isn't easy, it's simple. So something we should probably talk about is that some people experience, and I find that women who've had very simple first births can sometimes find second births oddly harder, because it doesn't amble its way. It's normal, and then especially if they're planning to go to hospital, if it suddenly fires away and accelerates, and they're trying to deal with all this stuff, and they haven't got extra support, they can feel a bit shocked by it. So it's not that it's always easier, which is why I do think home is an excellent choice, where I say to people, you know what your birth plan is? Go to the bedroom. That's it. Go to the bedroom. That's it. Or go to the smallest room in the house. I can remember myself shutting the front door. I was sort of holding on a bit. My daughter left with my mum, and I just felt this gear change. Right. I went to my bedroom. I leant on my bed like that. I wagged my tail sort of like this and I remember thinking, oh, this is nothing yet. I can remember making noises and things first time, so I must be hours to go. And exactly like you said, I can remember this literally hearing a strange noise. Didn't know it was me. And I was like almost going like, what's that?
Looking around.
And I was like, oh, that it was just literally it's not really nice to say the word possessed, but it's like a possession. It's like I know my favorite word. It's a seizure. It seizes you. It's like the baby is so directing events, and it becomes this very clear, decisive, wonderful thing. And it's in my book, in the Why Home Birth book, that one is, I can remember going on the top of the staircase and every contraction making a step down with the contraction, and I could feel with every single staircase, every stair and every contraction, more of her filling up. Got to the bottom, pool was at the bottom, got in, and she shot out like that. So it went bomb, 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 bomb. And that was from that first. It was like having a director directing events, so clearly, I'm please don't think everybody that we're saying everybody should have a home birth, because I have seen how home doesn't work for everybody, definitely. But what I do think is everybody should have access to a midwife should they need it. And I'm a big fan of you book anyway, and you just plan for it. And then if it doesn't unfold, you go to hospital. It's no big deal, like we always say. But I think to know you've got that safety, to me, it's really a bit of a risk to have partners and yourself manage this sudden acceleration, potentially car journey, triage, new labour ward, whatever, new midwife, all in the space of what is going to be effectively a very little space of time. That's a lot for the body to digest when it's trying to release. So and also the other thing I would say to people, I had a very, very frightened woman. She doesn't mind me saying that because I love her. She comes to me, she says, I am terrified at this. She's really frightened of birth. And she had a really easy first birth. And she's still, second time, she says it hasn't gone. And I was teasing her. I said, I don't believe you. And she just said, no, seriously, I don't know where it comes from. She just feels, she goes, I always, my whole life, think the sky's going to fall in. So fine. So I said, no, she said, no way will you ever get me having a home birth. I said, fine. I said, but you had a very quick first birth. That, you sure? Yeah, absolutely sure. I said, right, let's make that plan. So we made the plan. I said, you're going to have to go in early then. I did think she'd have to go in early because she had an hour and a half. I mean, it was so ridiculously quick at first birth. She said, yeah, that's what I'm going to do. And then before I ended that session, I said, okay, but on one condition. If your waters break, I know you don't like me to say this, but if your waters break and you're having contractions, you for safety of you and your baby, you are going to need to stay put and call an ambulance, because you literally, you're not going to make it. If you had an hour and a half birth first, and I knew for her to be stuck on a busy main road, it would have freaked her out totally, right? And it was at Christmas, and I went to see a play with our doula partner Michelle, and we were sitting in half time in the interval of the theatre, right? She texted me, she said, I've just come back from the park and I feel a bit crampy. Start of interval, getting the ice creams, right? Baby's born by the end of the interval.
Wow.
Her waters broke, she remembered my words, baby came, they called an ambulance. And she was laughing. Okay, it was a very strange swiftness. I mean, it's very rare you see someone give birth that quickly.
Yeah.
And it's something to remember. And I don't say this to frighten people, because she actually finally did conquer some fears through that, I think. And like we've said, please do not be frightened. We're saying, oh, second births are quick. They're not. But there are some things. Here's what I'm urging. I'm urging common sense, right? Stop acting let's stop responding in what the culture directs us to, and think with our bodies and with our common sense mummy instinct. We have to accept that second births are efficient, mostly. We have to accept that we have very good antenatal care in this country that tells us if our baby's equipped. So relax. We have amazing midwives that we can book with to come to our home, right? We also have to accept that in the middle, if a mother is already contracting and her waters break, I mean, I know a midwife friend told me that at midwife school, they're told, don't turn your back, to put gloves on. Where the waters go, if you turn back, and it used to be a standard trope joke thing, that if you the baby could be there by the time you've put your gloves on, right? So that's what we're talking. So, and yet it's amazing how our culture is just blind to this. Yeah, it won't happen to me. But we would operate in a rational, appropriate, proportionate way for everything else. So why do we just go, no, hospital for me, right? Now, sometimes, and let's reaffirm this, for some women, they just, a bit like Lauren actually, she does, by the way, she doesn't mind me using that. I've always, had permission. It is absolutely the only place to be, and I am not saying you should, hospital, your body would actually probably hold back until you got to hospital. So it is the case. Some people just do feel safe in hospital. So if that is really urgently present in you, stick to that and do that. But all I'm meaning is, for the vast majority who are a bit umming and ahhing about it, and now let's go through maybe the things you said at the beginning, Jenna. We were talking about some of the issues around second time, are really things we could clear up, like, oh, I can't have a baby at home because what about my toddler? Or what were we saying? There were some other issues, weren't there? Like,
there's often a concern, isn't there, that if you're home, what if the older child wakes up and kind of interrupts things? And I do find with second time mums, where the older child is going to be is a massive deal. And mums might worry about that more than the birth sometimes. If, childcare is not straightforward, if they haven't got lots of people around, that is a huge thing. So I would say to anyone listening who is a second time mum, maybe, try and lock in some really supportive childcare early on, so that is just taken out the equation. But I also find thinking a couple of births spring to mind in my head, actually quite a few second time births. Again, it comes down to safety. Often it's either like you said, when you shut the door, so like the child's gone off to nursery for the day and you've been bubbling all night, the child's off to nursery, boom, everything goes. Or often, I really often find this as a pattern with mine, is the older child goes to sleep, and again they've been bubbling all day, and it happens all through the night, and your older child wakes up with a new sibling, and it's gorgeous and wonderful, and if you're obviously home. So I think, again, in that, your body will take care of it for you, even if you don't, and your childcare isn't as supportive as you'd like it. Your body will not release until it is happy. So it will wait, usually, for when that child has gone off somewhere else. But also sometimes children are involved. One birth is springing to mind, and the child woke up and they came and joined in the fun, and it was really, really fine. And some people choose to have their children there, and again, that's something to consider. But I think it's, again, we do lots of planning and we think through things, and I think all of that is super important, because also, someone who struggles with anxiety, I know how anxious people think, and you do need the answers. You need the answers to take away the fear. That's just what you need. It's no good just saying it'll be fine. That doesn't work for an anxious mind. So I do understand you need to go through that process and you need to figure out the answers. But when you've done as much as you can, then it's time to say, I've done as much as I can, and it will be how it is, and trust that kind of bigger force of birth and, what you're going to learn through your birth. But I just wanted to come back. I know I'm going backwards, but I really wanted to come back to your point about, having the option to plan for a home birth as a second time mum. Something I always talk about often in my antenatals is, with second time mums, I often ask the question, kind of, how would you feel if you did get caught unawares? Like, how, if you are planning hospital, how's it going to feel if there isn't time to get to hospital? But your mind hasn't taken those steps to plan for it. And there's always a discussion, and they'll say, oh, that feels quite scary, and, that would be unexpected, and, we might not know what to do. So I always say, well, is it better then to book the home birth? Because all you're saying is, I want all my options, because you still get to change your mind, you still get to choose. Is it better to have that one-on-one care, book the home birth, get into the mindset of potentially being home? So then, yes, of course, you can just go off to hospital. But if you are home, you have a backup plan because you've got the preparation for it. Whereas I think it's far scarier to just accidentally have a baby at home than completely plan for it with the intention even of going to hospital.
But also, Jenna, it's less safe. So what the birth study did show, that was about planned home birth. So, it's actually, as much as we're saying, yeah, it's not a massive drama, at the same time, it's not ideal. It's much better to have a midwife that you can call. But the other thing is amazing about having what you need in place, it then allows you to listen more attunedly, more sensitively to the body's instructions. Because if you're second guessing yourself, when do we go in? When do we go in? What's going on? When's the right moment? It's back to the problems we've always talked about, the counting of contractions, the sort of measuring. That's all here. That's that neocortex. But one of the things I started teaching people second time was how to cope second time is by using, awful word, using their child. Because instead of thinking, oh, I've got to pat them off and get it arranged and create my zone, I mean, the very last thing you want to do is squander that very easy part of second birth where you're just bubbling, as you beautifully put it. Why, when you're just bubbling along, would you start putting fairy lights and all the sort of hypnobirth? You don't need to do all that. Much more oxytocin filled is watching the telly or reading stories to your child. If it's tea time, it's tea time. That they're a beautiful distraction. And it's honestly why they're living. What I love about second time birth is it literally shows you, it's like, it shows you the nuts and bolts that I wish we could more easily show first time mums, which is that when you literally wait for your body to take you, it becomes really clear. Well, if you're the second time, that's much more apparent, because most mothers, if they're not too worried, will happily carry on doing beans on toast and lean on the kitchen side. They'll happily keep reading a nursery rhyme until they can't, right? So I would say do that. Use it as your first room, second room guide, because the moment you can no longer read Three Little Pigs is the moment you need to retreat for this baby. And I mean, I remember there's a mother called Ailey who's in my book, and I remember popping around early evening, and she was feeling something, and it was bedtime. It was the usual kerfuffle time, that sort of witching hour. She was sort of, I'm just getting the tea, I don't think there's anything happening. And I said, fine, because I live near her. I said, I'll see you later. And she got on with bath time and bedtime. And then she got in the bath, and I don't know, well, because she was having a home birth, she didn't wait till the child, her body didn't wait. She was in the bath doing the pouring and chatting with her daughter, and then felt that shift, and just kind of almost robotically, she told me, just sort of got up, called her husband to take over with her 2-year-old, steamed into her bedroom, and just flung herself on her bed naked, and gave birth an hour and a half later. It was like that. Her body gave her, you are now in labour, you can't deal with a 2-year-old. So to go back to the, what will I do? Your body's sort of almost, your child is a fantastic litmus test of that big gear shift. It's like, I need someone to look after her now because I need to concentrate. And when you've got the home birth plan, I hate the home birth, the midwife coming to you plan, you get to respond to those cues in a much more organic way than second guessing and forward telling and precautionary measures where you go, right, let's get the car, let's get the care, let's get the phone the triage. That's a lot of stuff, rather than I'll just completely ignore it and do the day as normal with my toddler. I remember one woman once, she did a dolly washing line with her daughter, and they washed all the dolly clothes all day and peg the dolly washing. And I said, she said, oh no, it's nowhere near. She said, I'm just fine. I'm in the garden. It's heaven. Sun shining, dolly washing. And then when she went, hour at home, because it was about 8 o'clock again, the evening, and dad took over looking after, mother-in-law took the child, and she just gave birth. She had saved herself so much energy, so much angst, so much apprehension, so much self-watching. So what I love about second birth is it teaches everybody, teach first-time mums, like how to ignore what isn't asking anything of you, then pretend ignore what's not asking you, and then when it gives you that cue, it literally is that flip. Now you give it all your focus. Now your body will, and the focus isn't just you have to concentrate, but it's like decisive body and breath lead, and you follow. It's beautiful. It's like watching an orchestrated.
It is.
It's so efficient, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think with the children around, they offer that beautiful distraction, which just takes out all the fuss, all the fuss you could create without that distraction. But also, they're a beautiful reminder, like thinking on a bigger level, that you're already a mother, and you don't have to take that massive step that you do first time, into motherhood. You've done that almighty shift. You've already been doing it a couple of years, a few years, whatever. And I do think that plays a part as well.
Massive.
The emotional journey that you don't have that, you know what you're doing enough anyway. Well, as much as we all do,
It's interesting you should say that, because we haven't finished off on that, but I was going to say earlier when I mentioned that even women who haven't laboured before, fun enough, they get told on their first VBAC appointment, they often get told, well, you're the equivalent of a first-time mum. And that's just not true, including people who've literally never had a contraction. And then people say, well, how can it be? I've never laboured. And it's because of what you just said. It's because you are still a mother, and you've already passed the threshold break, the thresholdy feeling, and then the break that is on first-time labours, where you're basically edging your way on this quest. It's not that you're consciously anxious, but nature is generous and kind, and it's kind of easing you into this. You're going to be a mom, you're never going to be the same again, life is going to be different forever, all those things that you don't even know are going on. Second time, you haven't got them. They're completely free. You've done it. So all you have to do is dive in. And that's why I remember this mother who'd had a planned breech cesarean first time. And she said, but surely my labour's got to be as like a first time mum. I've never done it. I've never even had a contraction. It was, bar a couple of hours extra to a second time mum who'd had a baby labour. And it was still very short, 4 or 5 hours, very efficient, because she's thinking of it. It's all the things we've said. It's a toddler is back home. She wants life. She wants to get back to a toddler. She wants to consider, her body wants efficiency, right? But the main thing, like you said, is emotionally she's ready.
Yeah.
And if birth really is an agreement / release, it's like, okay, let's do it. Then second time mums represent that on so many levels. Yeah, let's do it. You know.
Almost I haven't got time for this. Can we get on with it?
Exactly. And that's so something to celebrate, isn't it? And I don't feel, and I find frustratingly,
it's freeing.
System maternity care, not from anyone's fault, it's just typical institutional flow. It always fascinates me when I listen to appointments, like if I'm in hospital and I can hear how second time, third time mums are talked to. It's almost as if it's all the same, and nobody. There might occasionally someone say, "Oh, might be a bit swifter this time," but you feel like saying, "It's like, wow, you know, like, I mean, actually, it should. If you know the famous thing about home being opt-in, it should be opting into medical care, or rather than opting in for home." I mean, really, first appointments, that discussion should be happening. It's like, oh, it's your second birth. You need to think about opting in for hospital this time, because all the evidence shows that it's much safer for you to have a baby at home, and you probably will feel that way too. Then if a mother says, no, out of the question, totally fine, they can respond accordingly. And the midwife will say, of course, you can come to hospital, of course. But they should surely be giving them the confidence, because it's that different. It's that simple a deal in a sense. And I mean, you know, again, we're talking about uncomplicated pregnancies, but it's just a marvel to me that it's always, everything's just lumped in and left to, oh well, it's a bit of a lottery. And the thing I find amazing, I went to a birth recently with a second time mum, and the midwives came in and they were very lovely, they're quite new, and I don't think they'd seen probably many. This woman had first easy birth as well. She was deep in her space, deep in her place, you know, right in, and very calm, very much letting her body birth the baby, not herself birth the baby. And so they started trying to deliver the baby, which is also bizarre. You know, can you imagine second time, it just, you know, and they could feel that they had to just step back. Okay, so step back. And she was just doing it. And the baby came out, you know, it's just a glidey slide. And the midwife said, you didn't need us. And the mother was, because she'd never had she was like, what do you mean? She thought it was hilarious. She's like, what do you mean? Why did you think that I'd need you? Like, I mean, you need a midwife to be on hand.
Yeah.
But they meant, because that was their experience, that I'm here to deliver your baby. Well, second time mums is just, you know, especially in home. I mean, the baby just comes out, doesn't it? Just falls out effectively. And I mean, occasionally you might have to give it a bit more welly if it's slightly tricky position, but so soft and so powerful is everything. The contractions are powerful, the body's soft. But even a baby in a tricky position, it's why you don't even have to worry about back-to-back babies second time, because they just swivel. A baby that's like that adjusts. It just all does it. You know, it's why also. Pardon?
And more chance of it doing it in a
well, same reason that induction second time, you never need a drip, very rarely, because even just the very first stage of induction will realign a baby and get it coming, because it doesn't need much. And it's the same. But it was a shame to me. I mean, okay, it was a little bit to do with inexperience, but it wasn't just that, because I've seen lots of, you know, not so experienced young midwives be completely understand that. It was to do with a system-led assumption and bias of that birth is pretty random, that it was like nobody was doing the arithmetic and going, well, hang on, every time I've seen a second birth, why not just apply reasons? Like, clearly certainly when I was having a baby, midwife sat on the landing second time, and you might have a little peep, and you'd say, that's it, well done, and you'd sort of gently keep an eye. That was it. And I worry that it's become now it's like, oh well, you can't know. Well, no, you can know. You can know a lot.
Yeah.
You know?
There's a lot. Yeah, absolutely. And I think we've covered a lot of what you can know in today's session. So maybe we leave it there for today.
Yes.
Thank you, Natalie, for all your wisdom.
And yours. Yeah, both of us together.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
We'll see you again. Bye.